Today, I'm with Dalia Saper. At just 24 years old, she bypassed the big law track to launch Saper Law, positioning herself as the intersection of social media, entertainment, and intellectual property, long before most firms even had a proper website. From arguing landmark cases before the Supreme Court to being the go-to legal commentator for Fox News, CNBC, and ABC News, Dalia has built a national brand by mastering the talking head strategy. We are going to unpack how she turned her fashion business into a legal powerhouse and why her office looks more like a creative agency than a law firm, and how she balances being a public personality with running a high-stakes litigation practice. Dalia, welcome to the Growth Switch.
Thank you for having me, Alex.
Our pleasure. Dalia, I want to start with how your career started, because usually when somebody at the start of their career just finishing the law school, the traditional track is to go into the big practice and learn in the safety of a big network. You chose a different part. Would you care to expand on what made you start your career the way you did?
Well, certainly it was a confluence of a few things. First and foremost was my interest in pursuing an area of law that was centered on creativity, whether that was going to be entertainment law or advertising law, and the difficulty to really pursue that in the Chicago market. You can only be, there's not that many firms that do just that. It's usually part of a bigger practice. So that was on the one hand what I wanted as a career goal. On the other hand, you also have the state of the market and the developing areas of law, and I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So I wanted to marry this desire for being, this entertainment lawyer, but also having my own little business. And I dabbled in that in law school with a friend, so that fashion production company. And that gave me the first taste of really having a small business, going through the trials and tribulations of having a business partner, dealing with clients, and so when I graduated, that was really my focus. And I did work for a small firm for about 6 months just to get my feet wet, just to get a sense for what it looks like to set up a small practice. And then took the plunge in June of 2005 with my laptop. And that was really, the rest was history. I framed my firm as being a social media law firm, which really meant nothing at the time other than Facebook was suddenly in the news and people were starting to adopt new social media platforms, and the firm has really grown organically and exponentially over the last 20 years.
That's some incredible growth, and
A
I
long
saw on your
answer to a
website.
short question. Sorry.
That's a great answer. And in 20 years, judging by the recent celebrations that you had, I saw a lot of happy clients. So I think they're definitely happy that it went the way it did. But having gone through that experience, what would be your advice to either younger lawyers or maybe somebody who is within the firm? Because it is one thing to practice law, and of course, it's quite another to actually manage the business of running a law firm.
Yeah, I think we have to be, is also a business. And even lawyers within big firms are expected to have a book of business to develop clientele and those types of relationships. So whether you work for a big firm or have your own, you're only as good as the client who's going to pay you to do the legal work. And so some people don't have that personality type. They need to work at a firm where they're not the rainmaker. But I think the answer, if you really want to progress up the ladder of any legal firm, whether it's your own or within a bigger firm or mid-sized firm, you have to learn the art of networking and really letting people know that you're good at the kind of law that you practice. So it's very important. It's something that you need to develop when you're in law school and as soon as you get out of law school.
Certainly. I think to jump back to the business that you had while you were still at university, a lot of lawyers in their career, they could be afraid to fail because they have to be perfect without hurting their chances for their progression. As entrepreneurs, sometimes we need to run experiments and not all experiments work out. Do you want to talk about that mindset of not being afraid to test something, even if it works out, and how your initial business helped you set up for your future success with the Saper law?
Absolutely. I think, yes, lawyers are trained to be risk averse. That the average lawyer is their job is to tell you what can get you into trouble. Part of, I think, the success of my firm is that we give practical legal advice. We give the law, and then we say, what's the likelihood that you'll need to defend this position versus whether it's technically, conduct or not. I think risks are like anything else, need to be balanced. What is the risk? I mean, not all risk is bad. Obviously, you're not going to take a risk that is likely to be very damaging, but small risks. Try these things out. And for me as a firm, it's, let me try a marketing program XYZ, see how that plays out and get the constant feedback. And I think you have to really be listening to the marketplace, listen to those in your office. I always say, as I get older and social media expands and develops, I rely more on the new law clerks that are in my office who are using these platforms in a way that I didn't use or that didn't exist when I was the social media maven back, when I started the firm.
Right. It takes a constant being in the know and practicing the latest. And sometimes it's worth having a partner, so employees that are able to tell you what is the latest and to translate those trends for you.
Yeah, you have to be adaptable. You have to not be afraid to adaptable and adopt new technologies. For us, it's AI. Before that, it was, pick the new platform of choice. And really, for me, the types of clients I have requires me to be up to date on these types of issues. I get questions from clients that I really don't know the answer to. And so as a result of doing the homework for that particular client, I'm now better positioned for the next client in this space.
Certainly. To the firms, you've been practicing what you preach for the last 20 years, but to the firms that are only thinking about being more active on media, whether it's digital media or potentially going to the news outlets as well, what would be your recommendation if they have a fear of doing something wrong and being seen in the not favorable light, maybe in front of the client, if that is their fear?
There's always, you have to have that passion and you have to have that risk taking personality to have your own firm, to have your own business. And I don't know if I have a magic answer for that question other than, you need to decide on a case by case basis. I will say, don't be too excited to broadcast what your cases are. You want to be cautious and careful about your brand, about what you do go to the media to talk about. And the safest thing is transparency. For me, I'm not afraid because I manage the client expectations at every stage. If I think it's going to be a risk to file a certain motion or to adopt a certain strategy, I communicate that. And I think you can hedge that risk by over communication and lots of transparency so that if things don't go as expected, it won't be a surprise to the client. They will be there along the ride, the legal ride with you.
Certainly. I want to double click on the word that you just said, the brand. I think historically, when we think about the brands, we think about the company logo, the firm logo. But historically, actually, legal profession always had the personal brand because the first point of contact for many big clients is the partner they know in the law firm first and the rest of the team second. And of course, the way you approached it really helped with that as well. How do you see the next step of evolution for law firms to build their presence for themselves, for their partners with the branding in 2026?
I think you need to have a global plan, and there's nothing that can replace just the face-to-face, word-of-mouth marketing that combined with your online presence is your brand. So for me, when I was first starting the firm, I was like a politician. Every day I was at a different event, shaking hands, kissing babies, not really. But I really started with a strong base. And I started by collaborating with organizations in my space so that my network was expanding through other organizations that had established membership and presence. And then once I had that foundation, I used that to parlay it into more national speaking events and then the news. And then the website, which sees all this credentialization in local community and networks that I've promoted. And all of that allows you to have that brand. So I don't think any of the marketing that a firm does is in a silo. You can't just expect it. I mean, some are able to do it, but some are just online, and that's fine. But I think to not be totally dependent on one channel of work and client referrals, you have to do all things at all times. You have to be engaged in your community, you have to maintain an online presence, and you have to let your network know what you've been up to. Together, and people know, okay, Dalia is this type of lawyer. She is a media entertainment lawyer. Oh, you have a defamation matter. Other lawyers and other clients refer back to us. And that exponentially expands over, 20 years because word of mouth is sometimes even more powerful than just a Google search.
Certainly. You have to build the presence and you have to be known for something. You've practiced exactly that. And you've probably seen that mistake in other law firms that choose to be generalists. And because of that, it can be very hard for them to promote. And what you're talking about, being a specialist, being known about something and documenting that. What do you think the good practice of that looks like when the firm is really diligent about documenting where they stand and what their specialty is, and different tools they could use to help their lawyers achieve that?
Yeah, I think it's, my clients, some of them are like, oh, I didn't know you also did trademark law. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course. Or I didn't know you're also a business lawyer. Or you're also a, defamation lawyer. So we have, I think our best tool is this is this regular newsletter. It's one of our most powerful ways to keep in touch with our clients, is that we try to keep the database of clients we do have updated with what we do and the types of law we practice through, in other things, client spotlights. And that's something we started a few years ago. We tell our clients, look, these are our other clients, and look at our network. And we've helped this company with these types of legal issues. We can help you as well. So I think being top of mind is key for a firm. And then not, being consistent. Then that's part of the same thing. Consistently letting your network know what you do so that they don't assume you're just a general, like, no one's coming to me for family law, because I've never said I'm a family lawyer. No one's really coming to me for personal injury law. I've never really promoted myself that way. So the niche is what it is, and let people remind them that that's your niche, so that you can continue to get those more high quality referrals.
Do you think with all the options and how fast paced the internet is, it is even possible for any firm to be referral only in 2026?
Depends on your practice area. I know some older attorneys in my network who are still editing documents by hand, and it's very frustrating. They'll send it to me and say, could you have your paralegal put these notes on the Word doc? And I'm like, come on, you can't practice that way. But some have, they've built such a long standing network and base client so that they can do that. I think if you're the kind of firm I am, or a firm with more developing types of issues and cases, that's not going to work. You need to be more savvy and depend on multiple referral sources.
Dalia, I wanted to explore some of the work that you've done, and I know that for many years you've been defending the digital frontier, and I'm curious, what are your sort of the commentary on Section 230, and what are the changes that maybe with everything that's happening online and how fast the AI and other things are progressing, what should we expect in the future?
What a question, right? So Section 230 is the law that provides platforms with immunity for the acts of their users, and both the left and the right on the political spectrum have their opinions. I think that it's an important law, and it is allowed for the development of the internet as we know it today. But at the same time, it needs some updates. And probably for me, those updates would be a faster mechanism with which to unmask an anonymous user who is engaging in illegal or bad conduct. So as a lawyer, the biggest challenge with Section 230 is often the difficulty in suing someone who's defamed you online or posted illegal content. So perhaps the balancing act here is that the platforms remain not liable so long as they follow something akin to the DMCA, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, that requires this submission of a takedown notice, and then they forward that to the poster. The poster has an opportunity to act, and then if there is no action, the content is removed. I'd like to see a mechanism that looks kind of like the DMCA takedowns in these various platforms that allow for user-generated content. I think that would be at least a step in protecting free speech and online anonymous speech, but also protect the individuals who are harmed by that bad actor on these platforms.
Do you think that, and this is a very theoretical, I suppose, question, but with the new capabilities of AI, do you think it would be easier for the legislator and the practitioners to actually see what makes for a good and applicable legislation, instead of passing the law then takes years and sometimes decades to figure out the impact it has? That timeline can be shortened by seeing, how different liabilities, different rights, how they would be exercised in practice, and what would make for the good law and how it should be practiced.
Well, if you're saying that, can we use AI to model out outcomes? Maybe. I don't think that the law will change its pace, though. We always have a lag between technology and legislation that regulates that technology. And we're seeing that with AI right now. We've got an administration that's very pro AI and wants it to kind of develop as freely as possible. And then we also have the other side where we're seeing really harmful impact, like deep fakes and children engaging with chatbots and directing them to do terrible things. So I don't know. I don't think that AI will fast track outcomes. I think that we really need to understand and keep up with the legal implications and societal implications of AI now that it's a tool that we didn't know really existed as it does 2 years ago. And now it's ubiquitous. And if you're not using it, you're falling behind.
Certainly.
But an interesting question for sure.
Thank you. Do you want to share your experience with the Supreme Court? Because I feel like it's always a career landmark for any attorney. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, sure. So it was the Illinois Supreme Court, not the US Supreme Court, but it was a case with a very novel and interesting fact pattern. I represented a woman who came to me, who found me online, which is kind of interesting in that in and of itself. She lived in California. She said, I've been defamed by someone who lives in Illinois. I need you to help me. And I said, okay, defamation case. But it wasn't a defamation case. It was a catfishing case. Not only was my client defamed, she was only defamed after my client's friends, stay with me, exposed the defendant for posing as a man and 23 other characters in order to engage in this online romantic relationship with my client for fun, really, but also over the course of this 1.5 year relationship, received over $10,000 in various gifts. So we brought the case as there is no really great cause of action because online impersonation isn't a count you can bring. So we had to fashion it as an intentional infliction of emotional distress, a fraud count, defamation after she was outed. And the first level, state court judges didn't really know what to do with the case. They kept dismissing it. And then ultimately we appealed those dismissals to the appellate court. And at the appellate court level, we were successful in part. And then it was appealed again to the Illinois Supreme Court. And the question was really, can you expect any sort of truth behind an online interaction, especially in the context this one was, they had met in a TV show chat room. Mm-hmm. But all that, we ultimately, the court ultimately did not rule in my client's favor. But the questions presented, and to your question of, getting over there, giving legal arguments, oral arguments in front of a panel of judges in the state capitol, exciting. And yes, really a once in a lifetime for most lawyers type of case and a chance to argue. I don't know if your viewers know, but not all cases go to the Illinois Supreme Court because the Illinois Supreme Court has to accept the case, whereas appeals at the first level are automatic, or as a matter of right. The Supreme Court cases are more selective. The judges have to choose to hear the case.
Fascinating. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing the story. On top of your legal work as well, you work as a mentor at 1871. I'm curious if you also want to share how that started, what drove you to become a mentor, and how's that practice maybe made you a better practitioner as well?
Oh, for sure. So 1871 is an incubator of sorts. It's a digital startup community that has a lot of resources and co-working spaces for startups and entrepreneurs. My office is steps away from what was once the 1871 headquarters and the hub. I started right when 1871 started. I started mentoring from the very beginning, mostly because that was the space I was in. Represent clients in the tech, social media, and internet space. And so it made sense to be where the startups were. And so mentorship allowed me to meet those clients, meet those startups, and really, through their cutting edge business models, also stay abreast of all the new legal issues and implications. So I've loved it. I've done it for years now. I have a standing office hours where entrepreneurs can sign up and just really have their basic questions answered without the stress of paying thousands of dollars in legal fees.
That's an interesting pattern that I've noticed talking to a lot of the founders of the law firms, is that they are very diligent about spending a portion of their time giving something back to the community that they are passionate about and providing that help themselves and their team as well. I'm guessing part of your team basically does the same and also participates in the community.
We give regular lectures to the Bar Association, the various state funded business startup organizations. And I've done that from day one of my firm. It's good for the firm. It's good for the startups. And like I said, it allows me to really stay abreast of that entrepreneurial community and what people are innovating and starting.
And since you've been doing it for a very long time, has also doing that work and helping in that way made a difference in bringing bigger clients to your practice as well, as a result of seeing what you are as a person and as a company?
Yeah, absolutely. What's novel about it, maybe not novel, but what's great about my practice is I can help a brand new startup LLC and also in the same day assist a Fortune 500 company with a licensing deal or a sweepstakes or contest. And so it doesn't really matter what the size of the business is. It's the niche, the area of law that we're good at. And so a big company might have multiple lawyers, but they come to us for this trademark dispute or for this particular promotional question. And then on the other side, we'll grow up with some clients. We've seen clients from day one all the way to getting sold for millions of dollars a few years later. And it's fun to be along for the ride. If you have that entrepreneurial itch, it's exciting to see how the business you help from the legal side grow, expand, get sold, go through that whole life cycle.
How did your personal practice, Saper Law, changed in the same way throughout the 20 years that you've started it and grown? Were there certain maybe milestones or chapters in your growth that you would categorize like almost as separate firms by the nature of things that changed?
It's a great question. I think honestly, the eras are more a function of my life eras. You know, when I got married, when I had my first child, when I had my second child, and how I had to adjust life events with managing the firm. When I hired my first employee, when I hired my second employee, my third employee. That's really, I think the practice has stayed consistent. The type of law we do has stayed consistent, except for, the new areas of law we've learned about. But as I've grown up and needed to adjust how I run the practice to align with my personal obligations, that's how I would define the eras of the firm. So it was like pre-children, post-children, this age, for whatever that's worth.
If I had to guess, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of clarity comes with the more responsibility in the personal life. So sometimes it's not about doing more and adding things, it's actually creating do not do list. Can you think about maybe example of something that you were doing when you first started that now is your do not do list, and maybe there's a story behind that?
Great question. Okay, I have so many. One is you don't need to go to everything, and sometimes there's a lot of diminishing returns. So I scaled back on those events and things I was going to, and really honing in on quality connections versus quantity collection. And I also implemented processes so that, as we were getting the same kinds of questions over and over again, I wouldn't answer them for the 10,000th time. I'd say, go watch this video, go fill out this intake form. And the combination of processes and being more selective about my time has really helped improve the firm's efficiency. We also now charge for consultations. The types of cases I have, especially let's say for defamation, a lot of those are not advisable to become full-blown lawsuits. And so we were spending hours listening to the fact patterns, listening to the issues, and then giving the good advice of, you don't need to pay us and leave this case alone, which was a real time and energy suck. And so then we implemented paid consults. And that, at first they're like, well, you're going to lose clients if you don't have free consultations. And I said, no, just saying no is very valuable. Telling someone they don't have a case is worth the consult fee. And those kinds of decisions have been implemented over time to help the firm run more smoothly. To your point, not having to be everywhere all the time and fielding every question just because someone calls the firm.
Makes a lot of sense. And I want to talk about the paid consult because this is the conversation we had with some of our partners. And there are a lot of fear that if you stopped offering free consult, you will not have anybody come into your offices, the phone will stop ringing. Do you think you were able to do that confidently because you built that media brand as well, and you already done all that work, that you had confidence that the phone will continue ringing, the people will continue to...
Yeah, I do think that's true. I didn't have free consults for the first, 5, I don't even know how many years of my practice. But once you've established your credibility, then you don't need to prove yourself. And people know this is the kind of cases I take on, and I've done that with some success, a lot of success. And that's valuable. So understanding your worth and where you are in your career will govern what you charge, what your hourly rate is, and whether or not you want to offer free consultations. For us, because it's not always no, if there's a referral that comes from a trusted source, or if there's someone who I believe it's worthwhile to have that conversation with, to explore a broader case, then yes, we have exceptions. But we're not afraid to implement the default, which is go to our website, find a time that works for you, pay for the consult, and we go from there.
One of the things that you said, that you noticed pattern that some of the questions were coming up and again, and you made video to answer it or to have a forum dedicated to it. What was your initial process to even find that there are some patterns that, same questions or same expectations that have to be set? Take me to the very beginning when you spotted that, and what was your process to solve it once and for all?
Absolutely. Well, I think, being a small firm, I know everything kind of goes through me. So I know what the pain points were. It's not a bigger firm where I'm trying to understand where the pain points are. I found myself spending too much time fielding questions. So then we started writing answers in blog posts. And then I said, you know what? People want to see my face. They want to sense for what the lawyer who will handle their case will look like, how they will answer questions. And so that's where the video piece came in. We've had videos on our page for, I think, 12 to 15 years. And it's something I implemented fairly a long time before I think it was more of the norm. And then I stopped answering a lot of the phone calls myself. Then I was like, okay, now I understand the point of a receptionist, because then when I answered the calls, I felt obligated to give all the answers out. And so it was just really high volume, repeat of questions that I was personally fielding. And that was what sparked the need for the videos, the systems, the script that I have the office manager, whoever's answering our phones, to follow.
I'm curious about that transition from when you were answering the phone to when you started delegating that. We've seen in some firms, if it is the operator of a law firm answering the question themselves, then all the questions and everything is taken personally. And it's more about the emotion than necessarily the data. If it is actually the right questions being asked, if it's the right clients coming forward. And when that is delegated, it's a little bit easier to look at the data and to see, what's working to actually drive the right type of cases to the firm and to position the firm correctly. Has that also been your experience, that once you had the delegation, you could start measuring it with a different, basically, look?
Yeah, it's hard to delegate that piece. If you're the business owner and you're the law firm owner, you have a way of answering those questions, and you have the broad knowledge base to field the various questions. So before you delegate, training is very important. You don't want to lose a client because the person answering the phone doesn't know the answer. So for us, that was a transition and a pain point until, again, we had systems in place to ensure that we weren't losing anybody great. But yes, of course, when you have a system, whether it's delegating it or you yourself answering calls, but keeping track of the source of the call, what the request was, you can certainly be more powerful. The reality is, though, the small businesses don't have those metrics. The business owner or the law firm is where the law firm partners got a lot of hats. But the more you can systemize and outsource and track, of course, you can make better marketing decisions, better systematic decisions, hiring decisions, all the things.
I want to double click on that. What are the data points that you still look at even today in terms of the systems that you build and the marketing metrics? What are the things that maybe you have a dashboard or something that you review quite often?
Right. So we have our own internal client management system. We like to know where clients come from. Is it a Google search? Is it a referral? If it's a referral, which lawyer is giving us lots of referrals? Make sure we thank them, send them something to acknowledge their referrals. What other data points? I mean, that's really it. We have all the financial data points. Who's our biggest client? Who's a repeat client? We serve as outside counsel to a lot of clients, where we are kind of basically their external law firm, in-house law firm. And so, yeah, I mean, there's lots of things you can measure. I think for most small businesses, where their business is coming from is probably the most important. Where should we invest our time marketing ourselves? Is it the personal relationships? Is it the online presence? Some firms spend a lot of money on SEO and online marketing. I've never done that, partly because of the niche that I'm in. I probably should do more of it, but our phone is ringing, and our website's so organically built over 20 years that the content just kind of naturally ranks. But that's a personal decision depending on the type of law, the size of the law firm and what the market is that they're competing in.
If you had to start or help somebody else start from the day one in 2026, when they don't have the 20 years of media exposure and being seen and doing the cases, high profile cases, what would your go-to advice would be for them to start building practice if they don't have the referrals coming in just yet?
That's where you're going to have to spend more money on your online presence. And then I always say there's no cheat code for building a reputation and foundation. You have to be, I mean, maybe there is, I don't know. I only can speak from my experience, is that either you have a lot of money and you can really launch a good online campaign and try to build yourself out to be more than, bigger firm, or have a good brand that might attract the online visitor. But that to me is not sufficient. You don't want to be totally dependent on a Google algorithm to get your business. So it's going to require both. It's going to require an online presence and then going to those events, shaking those hands, meeting those people, having lunches with referral sources. And you're not going to overnight become a big, maybe you will, but I think the odds are that you have to build that foundation and it takes time.
100%. You've been one of the first people to take advantage of social media and make the videos, again, before most law firms were taking their website seriously. From doing it yourself initially to having different team members and working externally with marketing partners, what do you think good marketing partner looks like for the growing and ambitious law firm in 2026?
Great question. Just like when social media first became a thing and now with AI, there's a lot of people who overnight are suddenly experts. So I would say you need to vet that marketing firm. Who have they worked with? What are their case studies? I had clients come to me with social media contracts and they were like, for $5,000, we will set up your Facebook account. And I said, look, you need to really understand that you don't need to spend $5,000 to set up a Facebook account. If that's all they're doing for you, that's ridiculous. So you have to be a somewhat educated consumer. You need to know and vet the marketing partner. What is their skill set? Are they really good at user experience? Are they better at, the back end functionality of your site? What are they SEO experts? Do they understand what the internet looks like today and what you have to do to build that brand? So don't be afraid to ask questions, but you have to be educated as the consumer of these marketing services. So you're not paying a lot of money for something that's not that, the value isn't there.
In terms of the communication, like you said, sometimes the service is being offered, and unfortunately marketing has a bad rep for, like you said, experts popping up overnight that saying that they are expert in the latest big trend. I think communication is a big part of that, and setting expectations, just like with any cases. Those are the chances to win. Those are the probable outcomes. What may be some of the examples and some stories you can share of where you worked with somebody that had really good communication style that's exactly said, this is possible, this is how long it's going to take, this is the likely outcome, if you have any story to share? Absolutely. And you said something interesting as well. I don't know if you want to add to it, but it takes both parties to get good results, because of course the marketing side needs to have their deliverables and they need to be proactive and actually doing something other than just being there watching the paint dry, so to speak. Same it takes for the law firm side as well. You need to be able to provide the content, to create the clips, provide the cases that you can share and talk about, to actually take the full advantage of what marketing is amplifying. Absolutely. The co-parenting, that's good. Dalia, what are the big objectives you have for yourself or for the firm for 2026? It's always day one. Perfect. Where can somebody who wants to learn more about your work and Saper Law can find you online? And I feel like you definitely demonstrated with everything you've done over the last 20 years. Perfect. Dalia, thank you so much for coming today.